So Parīkṣit's asking, and Sukadeva Goswami is answering. So slide number 4, translation. He also prepared himself to reply to all that King Parīkṣit had inquired from him. Mahārāja Parīkṣit was the best in the dynasty of the Pāṇḍus, and thus he was able to ask the right questions from the right person. Please repeat. He also prepared himself.
He also prepared himself
to reply to all that King Parīkṣit had inquired from him.
To reply to all that King Parīkṣit had inquired from him.
Mahārāja Parīkṣit was the best in the dynasty of the Pāṇḍus.
Mahārāja Parīkṣit was the best in the dynasty of the Pāṇḍus.
And thus he was able to ask the right questions.
And thus he was able to ask the right questions
from the right person.
From the right person.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mahārāj. It's low on the dry here. Pressed the wrong button.
Okay.
Now
so okay now?
Yes.
You can hear us?
Now we can hear you.
Oh, okay. You're a misfortune. Okay. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. It's a long purport. Mahārāja Parīkṣit asked many questions, some of them very curiously. So how do we know which ones were asked very curiously? And other ones which were asked more like, maybe like in a more, what's the word, like sober fashion or something. Okay? Maybe Vishwanath Chakrabarti says in his purport. To know things as they are. Okay? But it is not necessary for the master to answer them in the order of the disciples' inquiries, one after another. But Sukadeva Goswami, experienced teacher that he was, answered all the questions in a systematic way as they were received from the chain of disciplic succession. Okay? And he answered all of them without exception. So for me, it's kind of have this very analogical mind. I just put everything in little machines and little boxes connected up, and it's just my mind works very well that way, And so I try to do the same thing with the Bhagavatam, and just, And so for me, this is I've read before many times, of course. I guess most of us. But for me, it was enlightening here that all these questions are answered, it says. And it says he does them in a systematic way, which maybe doesn't match up with the student's order of the questions, because some answers, of course, may be, required before other questions can be properly understood. So the teacher may rearrange the things. And it says Sukadeva Goswami is an experienced teacher. So where was he preaching before? Was it in the higher planetary systems or something like that? But he's going to do it. And also, what is his systematic way? Systematic way as they were received from the chain of disciplic succession. So it sounds like his system is also the way they were organized, from how he heard it from his father, Vyasadeva. And of course, Vyasadeva heard it from Narada Muni from Lord Brahma. And now Mahārāja Parīkṣit, he's hearing this conversation between Brahma and Narada Muni. And after hearing their discussion, then he wants to hear how Narada Muni expanded it all like that. So very, very, what's the word, like fundamental section in the Bhagavatam, this chapter. And then there'll be 2 more chapters in the second canto here. And then we'll go ahead to hearing trying to hear higher materials than were spoken by Vishnu to Brahma in the 3rd canto, like that. And as we were saying, that in our 5th canto, we're in the Bhakti Bhai Baba program, we're finishing the 5th canto. Actually, this weekend we finished the 5th canto. Jai! Okay. And we finished it off with, of course, the wonderful chapter on all the hells. And it's every time you go through a course, you can take more effort. So I pointed out before that one of the questions by Sukadeva Mahārāja Parīkṣit, he specifically asks, tell me about the orbits of this universe, the mountains, the planets, the rivers, the oceans, the islands, and it gives exactly the frames that the fifth canto includes. And we were even wondering, why does it talk about all these mountains, trees, and stuff? But it's exactly matches this question. So Prabhupada says, and he answered all of them without exception. So it'd be a nice program to see where all these questions are answered. Of course, more questions are asked. Suhotra Swami and I think it was Krishna Kshetra and so on, they were trying to do that kind of approach, just looking at the questions being asked in the Bhagavatam and then seeing how the answers were there. I think it went pretty well until maybe about like the third canto or something. Then it started to kind of have some problem with it. But later on, it probably picks up again. So this is a nice way to look at the Bhagavatam, the questions being asked. Okay, if we go down here, the next slide then, because it says, thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the second canto, 8th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam entitled Questions by King Parīkṣit. So let's go on to slide number 6, if you could, Master. And so these are the three verses describing Sukadeva Goswami's responses to the questions, 27, 28, and today 29. Sukadeva Goswami said, thus Sukadeva Goswami, being invited by Mahārāja Parīkṣit to speak on topics of Lord Sri Krishna with the devotees, was very much pleased. He began to reply to the inquiries of Mahārāja Parīkṣit by saying that the science of the personality of Godhead was spoken first by the Lord himself to Brahma when he was first born. Srimad Bhagavatam is a supplementary Vedic literature, and it is just in pursuance of the Vedas. And today, he also prepared himself to reply to all that King Parīkṣit had inquired from him. Mahārāja Parīkṣit was the best in the dynasty of the Pāṇḍus, and thus he was able to ask the right questions from the right person. So, of course, that last part not really in the purport and the translation, I don't think, in Sanskrit. But, of course, it's a very important point, that you have to ask the right questions, from the right person. So again and again and again and again, we see in the Bhagavatam that it starts off by, the qualifications of the speaker are first glorified, illuminated, highlighted by the person asking the questions. So even the person who's being questioned, he can put himself in the proper mindset in terms of what's being expected of him. And then when he answers, he then glorifies the person who asked the questions, and gives a proper perspective, and the student can put himself properly. And the transmission of knowledge is very, very, very efficient like that. I remember one time I was trying to understand something about physical nature from Satputta, and it had to do with space perception, which is because space is produced by sound. So it's very interesting because our Western science, Mahārāja was talking a lot about this, is highly biased towards vision. If you see all the results, when they try and get hard scientific results, data, they always want to see it. If it's a sound, they want to reduce it down to something they can see. So we know from our science that that's third class in terms of a sense perception. First class is hearing, second class is touch, third class is seeing. And so I was wondering about this because there is some literature in science on sound acoustical perception. If you go to any library and look up the Library of Congress catalog number BF469, that would be before Freud. BF469. It'll give you very interesting books if you're into this kind of thing. A lot of cross-cultural studies on sound perception. Very interesting because it's right next door. Sound is right next door to the psychological level. So if you can get people to appreciate the acoustical level, they make a big step forward. And we've done this many times in preaching in these universities and stuff. So sound is the subtlest element there, and with the proper orientation, then the communication can be very efficient, like that. So Mahārāja Parīkṣit was able to ask the proper questions to the proper person, like that. Then, if we go ahead here. Okay, on slide number 7, because right in the very beginning, it said that Sukadeva Goswami was very pleased, to be asked questions about the Supreme Lord and the association of devotees. So right from the very beginning, Prabhupada says, actually bona fide hearing can only take place, amongst devotees and so on. So there's one verse which is, if it's quoted, this is the verse that's quoted many times, what we see. And it's Kapila Dev 3:25-25. So Kapila Dev is talking to his mother, or his mother is talking to Kapila Dev. Probably at this point, maybe Devahuti is glorifying Lord Kapila's instructions. And Satang prasangat, satam prasangan mamavirya samvedo bhavanti hrit karna rasayana kataha tajjoshanad as apavarga vartmani shraddha ratir bhaktir anukramishati. So the satangs are the devotees, and prasangam is sangha, mamavirya samvedo. So I guess topics about me or something like that. Bhavanti, it does develop. Hrit, karna, maybe heart, ear. Rasayana kataha, very tasteful discussions. Tajjoshanad as apavarga vartmani. So if we go to the next slide, number 8. Go down, Master. Okay. In the association of pure devotees, discussions of the pastimes and activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is very pleasing and satisfying to the ear and the heart. By cultivating such knowledge, one gradually becomes advanced on the path of liberation. Thereafter he is liberated, and his attraction becomes fixed. Then real devotion and devotional service begin. Apavarga vartmani, on the path of liberation. Shraddha, firm faith. Rati, attraction. Bhakti, devotion. Anukramishati, will follow in order. So, of course, super famous verse, maybe the most famous verse, is the one at the end of the western wave, western part of the ocean, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Ado Shraddha, Sadhu Sangha, Bhajana Kriya, Anartha Nivritti, Nishta. So we have maybe Shraddha is Nishta, firm faith, Nishta. Ruchi, okay, attraction. Asaktis, attachment. And Bhava and Prema. Like that. So this is the point. And looking at them, I wasn't able to review all of them, but Mahārāja Parīkṣit's questions. Again, Prabhupada says that we've heard this before. I think Gary Govardhan was saying this, that the Bhagavatam starts up philosophically and historically where the Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Gita stop. And so the beginning we find very, very Upanishadic language in the Bhagavatam. At Hokshaja, Akhilyartma. It's describing Krishna Vasudeva, he who resides everywhere, like that. When Krishna enters Dwarka, there's some very some sentiments which seem a little bit above the more like Dasya Rasa of Bhishma or the ladies in Hastinapur when he's leaving. So the beginning is starting off like that, not to scare anybody away with too much personality too quick. So his questions also seem to be like that. He asks, what are the opulences of the great sages and things like that, And later on, of course, when he does come to the 10th canto in this natural development, then when different stories are being related about the kidnapping of Subhadra and, these kind of things, then he does start asking more questions very curiously about why did he do that? Why did that happen? This happened, whatever, He he may even be like a little disturbed that Lord Balaram was against the marriage of Arjuna and Subhadra, because if Balaram had foiled it, then Mahārāja Parīkṣit wouldn't have been born. So he may take all these things quite personally, like that. So he actually, his ancestors participated in all these pastimes. So he's hearing from people who are actually there. What a situation that you were born right after, Krishna disappeared. Of course, many devotees, appearing right after Prabhupada's disappearance. But they talk to people who are actually there, and they can get cross references and so on. So Mahārāja Parīkṣit was the right person the Pāṇḍus asked the right person, these questions. And then this very subtle connection between sound, and he can actually then go through these levels of apavarga, vartmani, becoming more and more liberated, becomes vimukti jnani. He gets wisdom, he gets knowledge, he gets logic, he gets references, absolute references. He builds his logic, and then he goes from being a Bhakta Mishra Gyan to Bhakta Mishra Jnani Vimukti. It is Upadeshamrita number 10. And then actually liberated. I remember I was in the Bhaktivedanta Institute over in San Francisco, upstairs, standing behind the conference table, maybe, some time of the day, and suddenly I was struck with this realization that I always was happy, or at least I was never distressed, and it was shocking. And my mind started when my intelligence tossed this to my mind or back and forth, it started like examining, wait a second, is that true? I think maybe about 7 years after being a devotee, maybe 9 years. And I saw, whenever I would become depressed or something like that, then my intelligence would kick in and say, no, this, that, and something, or you're being slack, you're kind of cheating Prabhupada and Krishna, and you're starting to slide, but get it together, act properly, So then I'd be back on the road again, back on the pathway, the apavarga vartmani, So that happens when we become advanced. Of course, who's more liberated in their dealings with Krishna? The Raktak, Patrak, Chitrak, or Subal, Sridham, and Bharatapa. Of course, the cowherd boys are more liberated. So this liberation goes in different levels like that. Okay. And then as we become free, then we can actually become nishta. We can actually get a strong, fixed taste. 4 Mangalarti, 4 16 rounds, 4 Srimad Bhagavatam, 4 finding a good place of Sankirtan, for the evening program, for learning we know how to associate with devotees, and so we're fixed in that. And what comes from the nishta, ruchi, attraction, asaktis, I'm attached, and then bhava, So this is the real process, and I think that these questions by Mahārāja Parīkṣit, it'd be interesting to see where they're answered, if they're all answered by the 5th canto or something, and then if he's more, because some of his questions are just details on the previous questions, but then it seems that he's actually, making more advanced questions as he goes on like that, Okay, let's go ahead then, a little preview, slide number 9. Okay. And slide number 9 is chapter 9, next chapter. If we look at that, what we're going to see is 291. Sri Sukadeva Goswami said, O king, unless one is influenced by the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there is no meaning to the relationship of the pure soul in pure consciousness with the material body. That relationship is just like a dreamer's seeing his own body working. The illusion living entity appears in so many forms offered by the external energy of the Lord, while enjoying in the modes of material nature. The encaged living entity misconceives, thinking in terms of I and mine. So that was the very first question, right? Does the living entity acquire this body by chance or by some other reason like that? In 294 it goes on, O King Parīkṣit, O King, the personality of Godhead being very much pleased with Lord Brahma because of his non-deceptive penance in Bhakti Yoga, presented his eternal transcendental form before Brahma, and that is the objective goal for purifying the conditioned souls. So because it says that Mahārāja Sukadeva Goswami was going to answer this all as Lord Brahma had been instructed by the Lord himself. So next chapter then will describe all of this, how Lord Brahma was doing austerities, how he got darshan of the spiritual world, which I think it says is Goloka, not Goloka, no, sorry, Vaikuntha. And maybe it's Svetadweep. Yeah. And then, the Lord delivers the 4 nutshell verses. Aham evasam evagre nanyadyat sarasat param paschari tasari tasam. And so you have a few states of Sophia something. Got to refresh these things. Yeah. And so the whole Bhagavatam is there in 4 verses, basically. After you get those, with the Paramatma, you can figure everything else out. Everything else will be automatically revealed. You get those 4 verses down like that. And it's very nice what his description is of the Bhagavatam. So that's what Brahma got. And then after that, next chapter, some more details. But then the 3rd canto, then we're trying to understand what Brahma didn't get, which was the system of the position of Krishna in Dwarka, which Krishna explained to Uddhava before he left his body. And Maitreya heard, and therefore Vidura went to Maitreya and asked him. And after being satisfied, maybe by the 4th canto or something, somewhere maybe the 2nd, maybe the 3rd canto, then Vidura retired, and then Parīkṣit Mahārāja and Sukadeva Goswami just keep on going like that, describing then the children of Manu all the way up to the 8th canto. Then the other 13 Manus in the 8th canto, our Manu in the 9th canto, and Krishna and Balaram in the 10th canto. And then after that, 11th canto again, disappearance of Krishna, and the Manus after that, the descendants of our Manu after that. And 12th canto, of course, is the glories of Srimad Bhagavatam, summary of Srimad Bhagavatam, like that. So that's kind of the perspective, and now Mahārāja Parīkṣit has made these very specific questions based upon his previous contact. So today is also Ram Vijay, so we can talk a little bit about the victory of Ram over Ravana. But I don't know, are there any kind of specific questions or comments right now about these topics?
Well, you'll have to give me
I have a question. That's probably
I have an answer.
Well, no, you might not have an answer because it's not an easy question.
I have an answer. Hare Krishna.
We may have to do that. You may not have an answer, and it's really not that important of a question, but it did cross my mind, so I'm going to ask it. And I'm not in front of my computer right now, but it said in the purport, it referred to Sukadeva Goswami, experienced teacher that he was. Now, I would expect to hear a description of that for someone like, say, Narada Muni, who had so many disciples and such history of teaching. But as far as I can remember with Sukadeva Goswami, that he heard in the womb, and then upon leaving the womb, he just took off, running to the forest, and his father was calling, but he left, and then apparently there was some further training and studies, and then again, without any clothes, he shows up at the assembly of the great Vaishnavas at the passing of Mahārāja Parīkṣit, simply wearing the 4 directions. And the physiognomists acknowledge this is a great, great soul. He's offered the seat. But any thoughts on why the experienced teacher, I would say qualified, but I'm just curious why Prabhupada used the word experienced.
And this just proves that I am an inexperienced teacher because I discussed that precisely in the very last little bit, but I didn't talk about it very much. And he was described as teaching in the palaces of Indra, and sometimes like that, So that's all I know.
Sukadeva Goswami is described as teaching in the palaces of Indra?
I think one place there when it's describing, it probably gives the biographies, in different sages like that. It says sometimes he used to go to the heavenly planets and also, to talk to the demigods, the Bhagavatam.
So this is in between coming from the womb and meeting with the sages.
Again, that's all I know. It's like you say, probably can't get much more information than that. Experienced teacher that he was. Brahma Rata that he was.
Okay. Anyway, it just crossed my mind.
Okay, Giri Govardhan made this point that because I have this whole background in the Bhaktivedanta Institute, but he was talking about science a little bit, and I liked your presentation on science. My God, really very nice about destroying the world, engage in ghastly, horrible activities meant to destroy the world. But that's Kali Yuga. Squeeze the toothpaste tube, get everybody out. So, Gary Govardhan, he mentioned that all they can do is discover how much they don't know, and they leave it at that. And I was thinking that they don't leave it at that because they invent statistics. And statistics is a whole, incredibly convoluted, developed mathematical system to deal with trying to describe reality based upon what you don't know. They may acknowledge based upon a random number, and a random number is a number which you can't random event, and a random event is the outcome of which you can't predict. So they developed this whole incredibly sophisticated system of understanding things based upon neti.
But what's disturbing is they may acknowledge what they don't know, but they have no idea that they're never going to know. But if they lead us to believe that in time and with enough money for the research, they will know. That that's their sort of modus operandi, is that they will know, given enough time and enough study and enough observation, they're going to uncover all these things for us.
By chance. Yeah. Anyway, let's not disturb them. Let them go on. Okay. Shri Ram Jaya Ram Jaya Jaya Ram.
Shri Ram Jaya Ram Jaya
Jaya Jaya Ram.
Raghupati Raghava Raja Ram.
Raghupati Raghava Raja Ram.
Lanka Vijaya Raja Ram.
Lanka Vijaya Raja Ram.
I don't know if I can go into my Hanuman mode here like that.
Please do.
If I do, maybe the ladies will have to cover their ears sometimes, like that. Yeah. When Hanuman saw, he's a monkey, he's a gorilla, when he saw how Ravana was mistreating Sita, he started using a lot of bad language about Ravana's mother and sister and stuff like that, which we'll have to edit from the text here like that. But you can imagine what a monkey would say. Oh my God! Again, Hansaduta told us that Prabhupada said that Hanuman's service was always very nice, but sometimes it was a little gross, like that. So of course the whole history we know to some degree is that somebody's clicking there in the background. Got their keyboard going over the things, clackety clack. So that where to start? One Rakshasa was actually a race. And as far as I can tell, they matched up in Western culture to the trolls, because trolls are shape changers, and one maybe like 5 or 6 human beings can actually take down a troll. That's actually the arrangement, maybe, and they eat people, So the king of the trolls, anyway, this one Rakshasa, he sent his daughter, and she then kind of disturbed this rishi, Vishrava. He said, okay, you want relations, I'll give you a son, and there'll be demons, whatever, rascals. And she started crying. He said, all right, well, one of them will be a great devotee. So Kumbhakarna and Ravana, were the demons, and Vibhishana was a great devotee, like that. And Vibhishana, he was always, like respectful to his older brother, and Ravana was kind of respectful to him. And okay, Vibhishana, just calm down now, and I'll listen to what you have to say a little bit later, And so then, always trying to serve his brother and put him on the right path. And Vibhishana said, living in Lanka was like being a tongue surrounded by sharp teeth. Being a devotee of Vishnu in Lanka was like a tongue surrounded by sharp teeth. You always had to walk the line and this and that. And he was born with a few associates, like maybe 5 associates who were kind of like eternal associates or something. And his wife was Sharma. His wife Sharma also followed him. So then Ravana did all these austerities, as we know, and got benedictions that he could not, because Hiranyakasipu was like, bothered by different things, and Ravana was like thinking, right, this time let me get rid of, some of these problems. Let me look for the loopholes in the contract that my ancestor missed. He always had the picture. There's Hiranyakasipu on Lord Nrsimhadeva's lap with his intestines being torn out. Be a nice advertisement for the device. Shesha Das, others, like, don't try and write your own contracts like that. Yeah, next time, buddy, get a lawyer. So Ravana was trying to do that, and he covered everybody. I can't be defeated by the curses of these people. I can't this and that, and Brahma's giving him everything. So then Brahma said, well, what about invincibility to cockroaches and squirrels, or human beings and monkeys? So Ravana took it like that, like an insult. I mean, cockroaches and squirrels. Yeah. So he was so proud. That was where he lost it. He snuck it in there. So then, of course, Ravana was going on like this and conquering everybody. Even went down to hell, and even he didn't conquer death personified. But the thing was that if death personified could kill him in hell, because of Brahma's benediction, every other living entity in the universe would also die. So then Yamaraj and Death Personified kind of withdrew, and they didn't surrender to Ravana, but he took this close enough and kind of laughed and headed back to Lanka, which he'd taken away from Kuvera. And he was traveling in his kind of like convertible Cadillac and picking up beautiful girls here and there everywhere along the way and tossing them in the back, and they were all wailing and crying. And this went on for some time, of course. The human beings didn't really bother with them. It's like if you see some ants in your house, okay, to brush them away, or, So the human beings, he didn't really care about them so much. So Mahārāja Dasharatha was maintaining the world and Kamayoji pretty well. But then then the demigods, they sent Mantara, the hunchback, to agitate Kaikeyi, to create this whole problem like that. Because how did it come in like that? Well, she actually was an apsara, simply the demigods, to create this problem, and she did her job. So Ram was banished to the forest, and then while Ram was distracted from his ashram by Marich in the form of a deer, and then they did this plan. He screamed out, and the voice sounded like Ram, and Sita was bewildered by this. So she told Lakshman to go and say Ram, and he said, "Don't worry, he's okay." So she made a mistake. Maybe again an example of a lady, not having proper intelligence, like Chitraketu and Lord Shiva and Parvati. So she misunderstood that somehow or other she panicked that he's not going to go. So she said, "Oh, you've always wanted to enjoy me. Now that Ram is dying, you can let him die so you can enjoy me." So, of course, this was heavy. She was using heavy, and she may not even have believed that, but she was like using that to drive Lakshman to go and to save Ram, because she thought she knew better than Guru. It's interesting, huh? She thought she knew better how to deal with the situation than Lakshman, who's Guru. And all these problems were created by trying to serve God directly rather than through Guru. Yeah. And Lakshman later on apologized. He saying, but maybe I shouldn't have done that. But he was really pushed. So anyway, he left her, and then Ravana kidnapped her. And when she was kidnapped, she was screaming out, crying out, "Ram, Lakshman, Ram, Lakshman," and everybody wanted to help her. The deer, the squirrels, the demigods, but they were afraid of Ravana. And her cries were so piteous and so heartbreaking. It's like if we heard them, we would just like collapse on the ground, hearing how piteous they were like that. But it said that the entire universe went off of its axis of rotation like that because of her cries like that, so on. So Ravan left, and everybody is lamenting and anxiety. And Brahma is saying, yes, it's horrible. He said, but our purpose is served. Ravana is a dead man, like that. And that was it. He was finished at that point. Of course, if he returned Sita, okay, but then that would have put everything in the proper perspective like that. So then, of course, he took Sita, and then eventually, with the help of the Vanaras, the forest dwellers, Ram, and Hanumatpresaka, he found the location of Sita, and then they tried to figure out how to go there, because when Ravana was starting to count the number of monkeys, it was like 10 to the power of 1 times 10 to the power of 2 times 10 to the power of 3, Arbudas times Krishkaris times Kapkupis. It goes on and on like that, and it's like, it's more monkeys than you have bacteria in your kitchen sink, after not washing it for 3 years or something. It is like Ravana was shocked. It's like a lot of them. Of course, again, this is not fairy tale. This is all during the Treta Yuga, and everything was much bigger then, bigger and more accommodating. So there were many more possibilities for people, monkeys, and rakshasas. So finally, the ocean personified submitted and made the bridge, and they went there. And then they put themselves, I think, on Trikuta Mountain. So they were looking down at Ravana's palace, and like Ravana could see Ram. And he even just at the very end, he told him, please just give my wife back and come under my jurisdiction, and I'll forgive you, and everything will be okay. But Ravana wouldn't do it. So many things happening. We only have 9 minutes here. Sugriva was so upset that he jumped right across, I think, to some point there, before the battle started or that night before, and started engaging in a wrestling match with Ravana, and they fell down in front of the palace by the moat. And it did pretty good, But then Ravana started to use some magic, and Sugriva had to, get out of there quick. And Ram chastised him and said, you shouldn't have done that without my permission. And Sugriva said, I just couldn't control myself when I saw that rascal there, so on. So then Ram divided them up, and Hanuman at one gate, and different people like that, and they had a formation. And the battle began, and, they had gigantic, powerful monkeys. And Ravana was thinking, this will be a bunch of monkeys, what's this, and so on. Although in the back of his mind was the benediction there. So it was going on like that, and they were surprised that the Vanaras had, warriors like Minda and Vidvida, and so many people, Nila, Gandhamadan, who could smash, Prahashta and all these people like that. So it was going on for some time, and Ravana was sending more and more warriors out, and they were getting one after another smashed and annihilated. So finally Indrajit joined the battle, and he was using so much magic, and finally he punched a hole in Lakshman, so Hanuman had to go to the Himalayas, to get the herbs. And he brought back the entire thing. One description is he couldn't figure out which herb was the right one, so he said, okay, I'll bring back the entire mountain, but I'm sure to get the right one. So here's an example of his service, little gross. So it went on like that, then Lakshman killed Indrajit, depriving him of his power. And Ram and Ravan had a fight. They actually had it out one time, and Ravan used one of his most powerful weapons, and I think it knocked Ram to the ground like that, and the demigods were really worried. But Ram was able to recover, and that was really encouraging because everybody knew that was one of Ravana's most powerful weapons, and if Ram survived that, he was doing well, So it was going on like this, and this battle was really intense. It says that the battle between Ram and Ravana can only be compared to the battle between Ram and Ravana. It is incredible. Rama Shastra Bhatamaham. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, among wielders of weapons, I am Ram. Rama Shastra Bhatamaham. So might even look at it, but even Krishna doesn't portray the full power his heroic and astra manipulating power, except in the form of Ram. When Bharata went to the cottage to try and get Ram to come back, he looked in their cottage, and Ram and Sita and Lakshman were absent. But at one end of the cottage was a sacrificial fire burning, and next to it was Ram's bow. And it said his bow was throbbing with inconceivable, ruthless energy. So you can imagine just sitting there, kill, 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 kill. It's like there's only one consciousness. And I've heard that it was the Gada. And the Gada is transformed into the bow. And it just does simple things like that. Devotee, one-minded devotee, like that. I don't negotiate Prabhu, like that. So, Hanuman, Vanaras, again a description that Prabhupada says that Hanuman wasn't able to figure out necessarily all the intricacies of what is Dharma, what is Adharma in this situation. So he was just telling the other great apes, he said, well, I don't know, you're kind of maybe losing your enthusiasm for the fight, some of you, and you're wondering about this and that. He said, but I don't necessarily know all these details myself, but all I know is that Ram and Lakshman want this, and that's enough for me. Okay, yeah, they all got behind it too. So following Guru, following the person. And as it was going on like this, Ravana was having real problems because his heroes were being defeated one after another. Vibhishan was now giving strategic advice and also helping. So at one point, Indrajit had this suggestion that it was Halloween the next night, All Hallows Evening. That means the night before All Saints' Day. So actually, it's a very holy time. Anyway, it was something like that. It was some real dark moon night the day before. It only happens once a year. And he could do this sacrifice that would open the gates of hell onto the earth, and allow all the denizens of hell, to enter into the earth sphere like that and wreak havoc. And considering who they were, and considering who Ram and Lakshman were, in the end, they would probably end up a little bit better from this activity than Ram would. So even Ravana thought it was pretty drastic, and but things were getting tough. So he authorized it. Okay, open the gates of hell. So they started doing the sacrifice in one condemned grove, and at midnight, and all this kind of stuff going on. And somehow or other, the news reached the Vanaras, and they were all terrified, and it reached Vibhishan and Ram, and they were also thinking, this is terrible, The Ravana had set up a very, very intense blockade of army to protect these sacrificers, and no way they could get through. So they made a decision. Okay, we'll have a special forces group. So they had the entire army just at 11:30 just smashed against the Rakshasa army, and they softened it up just enough so this group of Lakshman, Hanuman, I forget who more, Angada, and about 4 or 5 more. And the top heroes made it through, and right behind it closed up, and they're going in there, and they're fighting like anything, and Indrajit's offering the ghee into the fire, 4, 3, 2, and it's the last ladle of ghee before he gets it. Hanuman jumps over the fire and knocks it out of his hand, and they fought their way back out. And Indrajit knew that was it. He said he couldn't do it again. It blew it, and it's okay. Next day he went into battle and was killed, I think, like that. So finally, all these things are going back and forth. Kumbhakarna came out. They had to wake him up. He had to run elephants across his stomach so he became a little hungry. When he heard what had happened, they woke him up. There were vats of cognac, Bacardi 151 rum, sitting there, and dead sheep with their fur and bones and everything else. And Kumbhakarna just chewed them all up and washed them down with a couple big glasses of straight, cognac. Burp. Then he headed over to the palace. So what is it? What are you waking me up for? Like that. And Ravana told him what had happened, and he was shaking his head. He said, "My dear younger brother, you are such an idiot. First you kidnap the mother of the universe. That's your first opening scenario here. First you kidnap the mother of the universe. then to finish everything off, you declare war on God. Stupid. Kidnap the mother of the universe and declare war on God. Okay, And so Ravana became a little depressed. And Kumbhakarna said, but don't worry, I'll help you. I'll take care of it. Nobody can defeat me, this and that, But he was thinking this is pretty doubtful. So then he circumambulated Ravana. Ravana put a garland about him. I guess my dear older brother gave him a garland and an army to go with him. And he went out, and he didn't go through the gate. He stepped right over the walls, and the monkey freaked out. It's like some of them covered their eyes, some of them passed out, some of them started running back to the bridge. And Vibhishan told Ram, he said, better tell him real quick it's a big machine, to kind of get the monkeys calmed down. And then it's a big battle. And, of course, finally Ram was like shooting arrows at Kumbhakarna. He blew off both his legs, and he kept on coming on the stumps. And then finally, I think he cut his head off, and that flew into the ocean or something and drowned 10,000 oxygenes with monkeys along with it or something. Ravana just passed out when he heard it. So finally they had their duel, and the last day then was that Ravana came out again with the last Rakshasa armies and everything else. And the battle went on like that, and Ravana, I guess everybody else just stopped fighting, the Rakshasas and the monkeys, just all, because they were watching it. It was unbelievable. And the chariots, Nathalie was sent by Indra from heaven, and he was using all the weapons and everything else like that. The chariot driving was incredible. And Ravana was sending arrows and piercing Ram, and Ram was counteracting them and blasting away at Ravana, but neither one could get the edge, And finally he cut off his heads, but they kept regrowing. So Vibhishana's hint was there that Ravana had this quantity of Amrit. And as long as he had the Amrit, he couldn't be killed. And then, of course, he then could use his energy to regenerate himself. And he was storing it in his navel. I think it was his navel, it says. Other place, I think it says his heart. So with that information, then Ram then called for the Brahmastra. And it describes the Brahmastra showed up, and it was made of the essential ultimate reality of the primordial elements of material energy, like that. It was the most essential, cosmogonical weapon you could imagine. And it came up as an arrow, and it was still dripping with blood and fat from his previous victims, like that. So then Ram put the arrow on his bow, and he said, "Oh, now, Ravan, I, whose determination never fails, shall send you to that place from which you shall not return. You are the worst of the Rakshasas. Indeed, you are like their urine. You kidnap my wife like a dog kidnaps food from the householder when he's not present." Like that. And so they shot the arrow and blasted Ravana into pieces or whatever. He died. And then appointed Vibhishana like that, And that was the victory of Ram over Ravan. Today is the whole day. And, of course, so many other pastimes after that, But that's the victory. And then very interesting because all the monkeys were brought back to life by Indra's potency. And some of them took birth in Ram Lila with Krishna. Of course, Jambavan continues on, and Vida and Vidvida become confused by Banasura's association, I think, and Balaram kills Vidvida. So we could all watch out, even personal associates, watch out for getting a bad association and not progressing. They could understand Ram, but they thought Lakshmana was some guy who did austerities like them. That's what I understand. They could appreciate God, but not Guru. And then Guru showed them he was just as powerful as God. But the other monkeys, okay, they all took birth as Brajabasis, and then they were getting yogurt from Krishna's hands and playing and participating in Krishna Lila. So one day, supposedly Mother Yashoda asked, Gopalji, why are you always giving yogurt to the monkeys like that? And he said, because in a previous life they did so much service for me, and I couldn't give them anything as a reward. But now I'm very rich, and I can give them, a reward. And to see how eagerly they're coming with their own hands to take this yogurt. So Mother Yashoda, one more thing to wonder, who is this child? So, Ram Vijayotsav Ki Jai. Any other comments about
Maharaj, I was
victory
going
of
to
Ram
say,
over Ravan.
today we understand why you're Hanumatpresaka, because you delivered
Well,
the
why
message
not?
in
I'm sure be
such
done.
an
I'll be done.
amazing way.
Jai Ramachandra ki jai.
That was wonderful.
Yeah, it was nice. Also, it matches up.
I want to hear it again.
Be Doug to telling us about hearing it again and again. You know, yeah. And of course, what happens is that as you hear it again and again, then actually, again, Hansaduta told us that Prabhupada said, if you just go on chanting Hare Krishna, you'll see pastimes you never read in any of my books. You know? So yeah, these bad things become manifest like that and stuff. You know? Little words, tell great stories. Okay, it's 12.
Maharaj, I got a question for you, Maharaj. This is
Balabhadra.
Yeah. We know that the battle of Kurukshetra lasted 18 days. How long did the war with Ram last, exactly?
We were discussing that yesterday, and we weren't quite sure because there are people who calculate it. You know, I think it wasn't much more than about 7 days, really. Maybe not even that. Because the first day, second day, I think maybe it was about 5 days altogether or something. You know.
But when does Hanuman go and burn the place up? Burn up Lanka?
He did that.
That's before, so
you
can say that.
Came back, and they just kind of got a few hours to get mobilized, this and that. They got down there for 1 week. I think it maybe took 3 days to get down there. And for 1 week, I think Ram sat in meditation. Then they invaded. Then after that, I think about 5 days, And so maybe less than altogether, maybe about 12 days from the time you saw Sita to the time she was able to go back and walk into the fire. Prove her chastity.
I wanted to add something since today is Ram Vijay, and we got a couple of minutes. We usually go a little longer than this. Hanuman, after Lord Ram, with a Brahmastra weapon, an arrow he received from Agastya Muni that was originally constructed for Indra, that was given to Agastya. He gave it to Ram, and that was the Brahmastra. Yeah. And it had the feathers were from Garuda, and the tip was had the Shakti of Agni and Surya, sun god. Wow. And I read where Ravan's armor was what made him invincible. He got it from Brahma, and this Brahmastra was able to pierce that armor, and took his life force right out of his body into the earth. Wow! When it struck his chest. So, but Hanuman was sent by Ram after Ravan was slain to the Ashok Grove to deliver the news to Sita and get a message from her. So I've read a number of Ramayans. I'm very careful about the Ramayans I read. I don't want to read stuff that's not true. And Purna Prajna, he takes notes when he studies these Mahabharata or the Ramayana, or he's even done a prose Chaitanya Bhagavat, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and Srimad Bhagavatam. So, and it's just the way he studies, and these books have been published. But anyway, I'm reading something that that's online connected with this day, and I came to this one story that I hadn't heard before. And Hanuman's in the Ashok Grove, and these hideous Rakshashis are still there, and he's saying, it would be a pleasure for me to punish these Rakshashis. They've tormented you for a year. Give me permission, and in front of you, I will punish them all. And then Sita says something very interesting. By nature, Sita was very kind to the downtrodden, so she replied, "They are only foolish maidservants who had to carry out the orders of the king. Whatever I have suffered was the result of my own misdeeds, and these Rakshashis acted only as instruments in the hands of destiny." And then she says, perhaps you've heard this story. There's an ancient story, and the punchline is, a great man never takes into account the offenses that are committed against him. And
bear, right?
And so, what's that?
It's a story about a bear, I think, yeah.
Yeah, the bear. And so there's a hunter being chased by a tiger. He climbs a tree. It just happens to be where a bear is, lives. And so the tiger says, this hunter is our common enemy, so you should push him out of the tree so I can eat him. and then the hunter the bear replies, this hunter has taken shelter in my home, so I'm not going to do any harm to him. So if I act in that way, it would be very unrighteous. So then the bear went to sleep. So when the tiger saw that, he told the hunter, if you push the bear out of the tree so I can eat him, I promise I won't harm you. So being swayed by the tiger, being afraid of the tiger, the hunter climbed up to the branch the bear was sleeping on, and he pushed him off the branch. But as the bear was falling, he managed to grab another branch and saved himself. So then the tiger, he's very clever, he says to the bear, because this hunter tried to kill you, you should retaliate by pushing him out of the tree. But even though the tiger appealed to the bear like this, again and again, he refused, saying, a great person never takes into account the sins of one who has offended him. Instead, at all costs, he keeps his vow to never return evil for evil, because he knows that good conduct is the ornament of virtuous persons.
Wow.
It's a great story. Isn't that a great story?
Sita Devi Ki Jai. Yeah. Such an example. Wow. Well, okay, I guess we're going to go ahead and cook some boga offering for Lord Ramachandra now.
Now, don't forget that tomorrow is Ekadashi.
Yes.
Right.
Maharaj, where did that little tidbit of nectar come about the reason that Krishna feeds the monkeys?
Oh, I don't know that one. I heard it someplace, Let's see. I don't know. Again, I was just, I don't know, Gopal Champu or something like that. So reading it. One quick point though is that Vidagwa's point is that Purna Prajna, his Ramayana, I read it many times, a smaller one. Krishna Dharma is online now. If you go to database.com, Krishna Dharma's Ramayana's there online, the whole thing, and the Mahabharata. But then they were actually the way that Purna Prajna got the Ramayana was, I think he and Bhakti Vikas Maharaj had a translation done, and they both took it, and then Purna Prajna wrote his like for teenagers, and Bhakti Vikas Maharaj wrote his, and it's very interesting because you can see it was the same basis, but Bhakti Vikas Maharaj goes into a lot more like philosophical discussions and stuff like that. Other than that, there was Prabhupada recommended, and the devotees were asking for it. I've got the name now. Some pundit. The name is pretty obvious, and it was in the UC Berkeley Library before anything was translated like that. He said it was some Shastri, maybe Hariprasad Shastri. I think maybe Hariprasad Shastri, and it is a very authentic translation like that. And there was a Gita Press Valmiki Ramayana, which I saw.
Right.
Which if anybody can get a hold of, if you see them on sale online, my God, probably just buy it up because it's been out of print. And other than that, there's so many Adhyatmika Ramayanas, and some of them have Mayavadi content. And there's Ramcharitmanas with Tulsidas, which Prabhupada is saying is, something's were added, poets' interpretation.
Yeah, he's changed some of the stories.
Yeah.
Tulsidas.
Yeah, but Prabhupada was at a Ramayana glorification organized by one lady, and he didn't say, he said people have been saying this is Ramayana, but it is actually poets' imagination. He put it like that in terms of the humor of how we deal with it. He wasn't really, forceful about it.
Yeah, Tulsi never meant to actually write a Ramayana. It's the ocean of Ram's. What is the translation of that? Ramachritmanas. It's a It's a devotional. It's the only Hindi classic in literature. It's very well. He was a world-class musician. That thing is sung in temples all over India. But it's a summary or his devotional glorification of Ram. That's basically what it is.
There something like I forget how many hundreds of different Ramayans, or we call it things like that, things taken from it. In Thailand, it's called Shri is Fat, so it's Fat Ram. There's a whole story, but it's all mixed up with local prime ministers and stuff like that. And so many versions of Ramayana available. There's online. I don't know what it is. There's one. It's in Hindi, but has very, very good artwork. It's not the Japanese collaboration, but it's another one, and very, very beautiful artwork and good story. And if you know the storyline, you can follow and actually even pick up on your Hindi then. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, I'll get to you later.
Thank you, Mahārāja. All glories to your service.
Thank you, Mahārāja. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mahārāja.
Hare Krishna.
Haribo.